Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday to you. On this November 14th, 2025, I got all of your stories for your rush hour ride to work. We got a fantastic program for you today. I had a chat with Cliff Cash. He's a very funny stand-up comedian and activist. He's from the Carolinas, but he's been marching up to Washington, D.C. with several protests that he's been doing with a lot of very big voices. You might have heard of him. If not, we have a great conversation about actually how Americans are coming together. You know, this whole experiment, the Rush Hour podcast, it's really about giving you the news that you need for your work week. What can I give you to get you to work so that you don't feel like you're in the dark? And we cover pop culture and politics and everything in between. But it is so hard to cover one without the other in today's world of 24-hour news cycles, especially with this monstrous story, this once in a generation, 100-year story. I wish it didn't exist, but the conspiracy around the Epstein files has reached a fever pitch. It's really a self-inflicted wound by the Trump administration. You have to remember, they did these binders labeled Epstein files that Pam Bondi had printed out at Kinko's and gave them to a bunch of right-leaning, conservative podcasters. Not even really credible ones that are called like libs of TikTok and random, quasi-famous people. They made a mockery out of it, and then they decided they weren't going to press any charges, and the case was closed. And at that point, America says, hold on a second. The fact that the Trump administration thought that people would just roll over on this one has been baffling. It's been the biggest self-own that we've had. And, while Trump's polling and his ratings have been the lowest they've ever been for other reasons, namely the economy, immigration issues and blowing up Venezuelan boats. But this has just flipped so many people. So we're going to talk about it here. And these leaked documents that just came out, they dropped something like 20,000+ emails on people, and everyone's going through them just trying to figure it all out. Well, here there's a document, an email that reveals Trump spent Thanksgiving with Jeffrey Epstein while he was president. Epstein was already a convicted sex offender at the time. The gathering took place in 2017, debunking Trump's claims that he stopped being friends with Epstein later in life, right? That was kind of the big argument. Trump always said, well, once I found out that Epstein was a creep, I canceled his membership from Mar-a-Lago, even though Epstein says he never was a member. So here we have the email chain where it's like, who are you going to eat with? And it lists Trump on the list. Could it be wrong? I guess so, maybe, but there's a lot of emails. Some of them tie Epstein to foreign governments like Russia, Israel, and I think even a few others. And there's the New York Times spiritual leaders like Deepak Chopra, and who the hell else knows who else might be a part of this. Again, these are just emails and correspondence, but they lead to a lot of questions. And this is exactly why there's been this vote to try to get the Epstein files released. This idea that Ghislaine Maxwell, right? She's a convicted sex offender. She's at this club-fed prison with a puppy. They're giving her the white glove treatment and probably going to pardon her. And yet she's, a monster by all accounts. She's the only person right now that's serving any time whatsoever for this, whole ring of possible, horrible behaviors. Well, here's Ben Shapiro, and he warns America that if Epstein files are released, it will destroy Trump's presidency, to which I say, okay.
Yesterday, after the House of Representatives reopened, Representative Adelita Grajova of Arizona became the 218th and final signature on the discharge petition. She joined all the other Democrats, as well as 4 Republicans, including 2 who hate President Trump and would like to destroy his presidency. That would be Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace.
Now, this idea that Thomas Massie just wants to destroy Trump's presidency, Ben Shapiro is not a dumb guy, right? He's one of the biggest conservative podcaster voices out there, if not the biggest, right? Well, Thomas Massie basically says, look, just because I don't want them to rip up the Constitution and blow up fishing vessels in the Caribbean Sea without due process, just because I don't want to, cover for a pedophile ring, that doesn't make me anti-American or even anti-Republican. It just means he's not going to fall in line. And what we've learned which is absolute insanity throughout this whole process, is that Trump, it was confirmed, had a meeting with Lauren Boebert. He tried to get one with Nancy Mace. Nancy Mace wouldn't even answer the phone, which is probably what I would do in that situation. I'd be like, I'm off skiing. No reception here, airplane mode. So gets Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room, a highly secure area where I'm sure she couldn't have her assistants, and I'm sure there were no other witnesses. And my guess is tried to shake her down, tried to say, you don't need to be a part of releasing these files. So Trump either covering for himself or other powerful people, enough is enough. Now, since we got these tie-break votes, about 100 other Republicans seemingly are going to sign off on this because they're lemmings and they want to be on the right side of history. Too little, too late. But either way, just the information that's coming out right now is leaving people, I guess really. The information coming out right now with all of the different emails is not just implicating a lot of people, it's reinvigorating this conversation. So they started it. This was self-inflicted from the Trump administration, trying to get all these influencers on board to drum up conversations around the Epstein files. And now people are saying, yeah, well, lie about one thing, lie about another. Why don't you want this released so bad? It's made a complete culture shift into, people that want transparency. And how about this for transparency? There's a special election happening here in Tennessee just in a few weeks. Voting's already open. It is Van Epps, who they are calling Van Epstein, versus Afton Bain. Afton won the Democratic primary, and while the numbers will show here she's losing, the Republicans do have the advantage. It's a shift of plus 17 since November 2024. Now, you don't have to be a political strategist to understand how momentous that is, especially in a deep red state, to see a shift in that direction. You're going to be seeing this all over the country from people that don't want to support reps and other political leaders that were A, hiding behind this pedo ring, B, not speaking up when Trump's, was doing his unlawful tariffs and all the other things going on. Well, enough is enough. And the, presidency. And again, one of the reasons why he said he wanted to run for a third term, a lot of people thought it was mainly because he didn't want to seem like a lame duck president. Now, the lame duck president is someone in their second term who no longer gets the respect because all the other politicians have to look out for what's next, what's going to happen in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It won't be Trump. So what side do people want to be on? Now you're going to see their true colors as they scramble. Now, I've said this all along. Look, I'm going to try my best to speak my truth as much as possible. That has ruffled feathers in my community. We went from a show that just covered pop culture to a show that covers more in-depth things, not from a place of expertise, just an everyday American that wants to speak up for justice, that wants to live by, the ideals that made our country so great, the freedom of speech, due process, treating everyone as equals. These are sort of like the pillars that should exist around podcasting, what is supposed to be the freest form of communication that we have. No corporate sponsors to get in the way, no people telling you what to say. I've never once had to have someone tell me what to say about anything, and that should be respected. And yet, I understand we've ruffled feathers. Cliff, when I have my conversation, I'm telling you what, he's ruffled feathers too. You get a big audience like he has, 250,000 people on Instagram. You don't want to lose people. You want to have as many friends in the party as possible. But what's more important than that is to be able to look yourself in the mirror, right? What's more important than trying to not burn any bridges is to tell the truth and to do it with purpose and to have a shred of decency in the process. I can't just talk about Love is Blind. I can't just talk about Golden Bachelor. In this world that we live in, where media companies are being bought up and late night hosts are being fired, what are you talking about? It's a dire time out there. And these are the conversations we need to have. I'm going to take a quick break for sponsors. And then when we come back, my conversation with Cliff Cash. Most holiday gifts end up in a drawer or the back of your closet or accidentally left at your cousin's house. Not this one. Mint Mobile is offering unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. That's their best deal of the year. It's the only holiday gift you'll actually use every single day. That's why I'm with Mint. You get a 3, 6, or 12-month unlimited plan for $15 a month. You can bring your current phone and number over to Mint, get high-speed data, unlimited text and talk on the nation's largest 5G network. So don't get them socks, get them premium wireless for $15 a month. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/TRH. That's mintmobile.com/TRH. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $95 for 6, or $180 for a 12-month plan. Required $15 a month, equivalent, taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Over 35 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com. I'm so excited today to talk to fellow comedian Cliff Cash. How are you?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, there's so much to talk about right now regarding the news, but what I love about you, you're huge on Instagram, 250,000 followers, and you go hard in the paint for your beliefs. You're putting together protests, protesting the government. The Epstein files are, new emails are coming out. Tell me like where you are this week as far as like what progress you're making on your end to get the word out that we're part of or you tell me, are we living in some sort of authoritarian hellscape? What's going on out there?
I mean, I think it's winnable for sure, but I think we're definitely in it. A lot of people talk about this is the rise of authoritarianism and whatever, and it's like when a U.S. president is completely ignoring the courts and ignoring the emoluments clause and ignoring the Constitution and ignoring precedent. I think we're fully in it. I mean, he's basically tripled his net worth through a crypto scam. And I mean, he's just breaking like every he breaks laws in his sleep. So we're in it, and I think the one of the biggest problems we face, not to bash my fellow Americans because it's really the Nazis that deserve the bashing, but I think that we're so sheltered and so privileged, and we're so used to being sort of in this kind of encapsulated in safety, being isolated by oceans and being, convincing ourselves our whole lives that we're number one and all that. We think it can't happen to us. And so it is now actually happening to us, and so many Americans are like, "Well, I'm going to go to Target and I'm just going to see how plays itself out. Maybe I'll protest next year if it's not better." And it's like we have to we have to stop this ASAP, because the longer it's like an infection. The longer you let it go, the worse it's going to get, and you're going to wish you would have addressed it.
Right. Yeah, like after Trump's first term, there was a lot of like whistleblowers, and people said, "Oh, you're being overly, like none of that's going to happen." And then we're seeing ships get blown out of the water.
Totally.
Wars are being started, and all of like you said, the money, the corruption, the carve outs, the tariffs. It seems to be one thing after another. Are you breaking through to MAGA because you've got the Southern twang? You're a Southern comedian. Like, are you noticing that there is people like the veils being lifted on this?
I don't know that I'm getting to like directly feel the gratification of changing minds. And honestly, I'm not trying real hard to change their minds. But I am trying to like get the truth in front of them, and it's kind of up to them at that point. I think a lot of what I'm doing is exhausting every idea I can think of besides violence. A lot of people are like, "Oh, this is violence is inevitable, conflict is inevitable," and my answer to that is, okay, even if you are right, and I don't know that you are, but even if you are, let's exhaust every other possible avenue first. Let's protest. Let's hold them accountable online. Let's have signs in our yard. Let's vote. Let's do all this stuff. Let's pursue every tool of democracy before it turns into something nasty. And so, not everybody agrees with my methods. I'm not nice. I'm not nice, and I'm not nice on purpose. But I get on Instagram and I talk a lot of trash to MAGA because they deserve it and they need to hear it. And I do hope that hearing it from a white man in the South who works on cars for fun and builds his own furniture, I think there's an element of like, if anybody's going to reach them, it's someone that they think is like them. And I'm not like them at all, but I'm happy to sort of masquerade as that a little bit if it's effective. Part of the strategy I've been working on politically for months now is to really amplify progressive veterans, because I feel like if there is anyone that can reach these cultists, and that's what they are, they're in a cult. If anybody can reach them, it's brave, proud U.S. veterans, and I think those people really need to be amplified, and I think people need to hear from them as well, because they're being treated worse by this administration than any president in U.S. history, and that's important to get out there too.
What's the next step in the protest world that you're a part of, and what do you think? Like, do you think the recent Epstein files coming out, the government shutdown, like is this adding to the movement, or like what's the tone like where you are?
So I live on the coast of North Carolina, but I'm making these trips up to DC. This next one coming up, I think, is my 15th trip this year since January, and I've always kind of been of the mindset that these big national protests in every city, they're really cool. Like that was a really cool first step to get people to like feel unified and whatever. But I've always really felt like DC is where it's going down. That's where these people are. That's where Stephen Miller is. That's where Russ Vaught is. That's where Trump is if he's not playing golf or sexually assaulting a child or whatever. Uh, so we got to be there too. And I keep telling people it's great to protest where you live, but it's time to protest where they live, and they live in DC. Um, as far as the tone of everything right now, my I feel this really strongly. This regime is a monster. Okay, like they're blowing up boats off the coast of these Central and South American countries, like you said. They're literally they're just like murdering people. They're disappearing innocent people to what are basically death camps that they may never get out of, taking them away from their children they may never see again. There's so much wicked and despicable shit coming out of this regime. Uh, so it is a monster. But what people need to realize is that it is a wounded and stumbling monster. His polling numbers are lower than they were right after January 6th, which means they're lower than they were right after COVID, which means they're lower than they were when he lost 2020, and he did lose it. Um, so, in my opinion, and then you add in Epstein, which is kryptonite, Gaza is kryptonite, Ukraine is kryptonite, the tariffs, all of these things are wildly unpopular. He's the least popular president in US history today, right now. So, my thing is, yes, he's a monster, but he's wounded, and this big protest action in DC could be a knockout punch. Now, I'm not saying that I think we have a great protest and he just leaves the White House the next day. That's not what I'm saying. But it could not come at a worse time for him. This is their worst nightmare. If we can get a big enough crowd in DC, that is the worst thing that could happen to him right before Thanksgiving, period. Uh, unless there's another Epstein and that gets released. I mean, like the guy's having the worst, this is the worst time of his life. So, it's really, really terrible optics when you have lower polling numbers than any president in recorded US history. And then tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or a million people come to DC to say, we hate your guts and we want you to leave our White House. So that's our goal. It's kind of, nobody is under the impression that protests are just going to put an end to the craziness. But everyone protesting recognizes the power of it. It's how Gandhi got things done. It's how women got the right to vote. It's how gay people got the right to marriage. This is what our job is as citizens. We are the horse and they are the cart, not the other way around. We call them leaders, but really what they do is follow the people. They follow what they think is politically popular. And if anybody doesn't think so, please Google Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's not jumping ship because she all of a sudden became an ethical, moral person with a good heart. She's a truly terrible human being. She's jumping ship because she's a clever enough political player to know which way the wind blows. And she knows that this regime's going down and she doesn't want to have the stank of it on her. And I dislike her with my whole heart, but she's clever enough to grasp all of that. And sadly, for many of the Republicans, they don't possess that same wit, or more of them would be jumping ship. But I think we're about to see that too. I think a lot of people are going to vote to release the Epstein files. And it is a parade of horribles for him. I mean, it's a nightmare for all this stuff to culminate in truly terrible optics for him and this regime.
Yeah, you're so right about how wounded they are, and yet there's a House of Reps and senators that really only like Thomas Massey and maybe one or two others. You said Marjorie Taylor Greene are beginning to dissent. So politically speaking, they're going to be attached to this for decades to come.
Yeah.
But like you said about the protesting, I mean, there's like science and data to back that up. That when a certain percentage of the population is at the protest, you can overtake the sentiment, and it's very hard for a government to overturn that. Like you never see a president overcome poll numbers like that unless something crazy happens, like a war or a terrorist attack. Of course, I think it was Venezuela that said they thwarted a false flag attack that the U.S. was planning as a sort of a facade to invade Venezuela. So what's interesting to me is there's people got into the MAGA movement for different reasons, and everyone's got a different red line that's being crossed. Some it's the Epstein files, some it's no new wars, some it's the trade, the wanting the budget to decrease and seeing the tax cuts for the ultra wealthy. So everyone's got different things, but like you're saying, this Thanksgiving is a time where families are going to come together, they're going to talk, they're going to realize that the cost of food hasn't gone down and whatnot. And so what's the date of your protest that you're planning right now?
So the main day is November 22nd. And the reason being is that that's a Saturday, and we know that's the most likely day for people to be able to, leave home and drive into the city. But anytime you do something on a Saturday, people complain Congress isn't even there, or the politicians aren't even there. So we're also doing Thursday and Friday. So on Thursday the 20th, the main rally is the 22nd. On Thursday the 20th, we're going to lead citizens into the halls of Congress. This will probably be, I don't know, I haven't counted, but the group that I'm doing this with is called Flare. They are flareusa.org online, flare.usa on all social media. They've been on the ground with a 24-hour presence since May. They've got a permit for a 24-hour camp, and they have tents set up. And so there's a volunteer there every hour of the day. They work this protest in shifts, and their goal is citizen lobbying for impeachment. And so I've joined with them for the last several months, and we have led citizens into Congress, 100 people at a time, 300 people at a time. On September 2nd, we led 1,500 people into the halls of Congress, and that is a record for the amount of citizens in Congress lobbying for impeachment. On November 20th, we hope we're going to blow that record out of the water, like tenfold. And so that's Thursday. And then on Friday, we're going to have a big veterans event and just amplifying progressive veterans. A bunch of veterans are going to speak, and it's just a chance for all these brave veterans who fought for this country to get together and meet each other and network and exchange information and become friends. Part of what I think is important during this time is to have a network of progressive veterans in every city and town and state around the United States. just in case we need them. I think that's a really, really important sort of in case infrastructure to set up. So that's the deal. 11/20 through 22. There's going to be protests during the day, all 3 days, or some type of political action during the day. And then at night, we've got some private ticketed events, and all of those events at night are raising the funds to make the daytime events happen. So on Thursday night, we've got a influencer meet and greet happy hour, and it's going to be people like Jolly Good Ginger, Jessica Denson, myself, USMC Angry Veteran, Official Empathy Tour, Booker Squared, Cats on a Couch, a Pissed Off Bartender. I mean, just like a couple dozen more that I don't want to list them all. But so if people make a big donation through the website, and this is all on removetheregime.com, but people can make a large donation and it gets them into that event. And then the other two nighttime events. On the 21st, we're doing a comedy show. We're calling it Comedy Church, and it's at a big, cool, progressive church. John Pavlovitz is going to be on the show opening it. Father Nathan Monk, myself, and Elizabeth Booker, hosted by my friend Larry Fulford. And then the last night will kind of be the wrap party. We're going to have 4 bands, a cash bar, and a really cool venue right in central DC. And we're calling that 4 bands, 1 cause. But those also have general admission tickets. They're like $45. So all of that is at removetheregime.com. This is just a fun way for us to raise funds instead of just asking people to send us, we're trying to give people something for their money. If they're donating, we want them to not just come to DC and protest for 3 days, come to DC and do these political actions during the day and have some fun and be a little joyous and present with other people at night and go home feeling energized and not wiped out. That's our hope.
Well, it sounds like a great celebration of the people, which is the byproduct of folks coming together as patriots to say enough is enough. And Cliff, you're doing a great job. Cliff Cash Comedy on Instagram, and I'll put a link in there so people can donate. But thanks again for spreading the word, and we'll be watching closely with everything that's going on.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Cliff. More of those to come. We're going to be interviewing people that are running for Senate. We have so many great interviews lined up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. Give us a 5-star review. This afternoon, we'll get back to more pop culture content, as we'll have updates on Candace Owens and Justin Baldoni. A lot coming this afternoon. Stick around for that. Otherwise, have a good Friday. We'll see you later. I'm Dave. This is The Rush.